Well, welcome to the Phase Yield 2021. It's a slightly different Phase Yield than we've seen in other years, and we're so sorry that we can't welcome you in person this year, but we look forward to welcoming you to our island home in person soon. In the meantime, we'll do our very best today to bring a little bit of Islay into your home tonight. To help us bring Phase Yield to life, we're joined by an illustrious cast of presenters today. We have David Turner, who's the distillery manager at Bowmore and will help guide us through the process that defines Bowmore's liquid style. We're also joined by Scott Milne, our prestige brand manager, and he'll share some exciting news about Bowmore, talking about some of the more recent releases and maybe giving you a little insight into what's coming in the future. We also have Linda Gray joining us. She's our assistant VC manager, and she'll regale us with tales of Islay and the VC. And then we have an additional special guest who's joining us today, and that's Johnny Fowle. And he's the director and senior specialist at Sotheby's, and he's actually going to speak to us today about collectability of Bowmore. And I'm sure as we all strive to pick up those limited Phase Yield bottlings, this will be something that really appeals to a large number of our audience tonight. So we'll begin today by speaking with David Turner and actually getting an understanding of what the process is, how the process actually impacts our flavour, and what are the key controls that David has in place to make sure that the quality of the spirit is never disturbed. So joining us today is David Turner, our distillery manager at Bowmore. Hello, David.
Good evening, Ian. Good evening to all who's joined. Hope you're all well and staying safe.
So I think today, David, we're going to start with the heart of the brand, which has always been that Bowmore 12. But could you maybe tell us a couple of things about the process that really define the character of the Bowmore liquid spirit?
Yeah, first of all, before we start, we recommend everyone to pour their drams, have them in the glass for about 20 minutes before we go into the tastings. It just lets the whisky get to room temperature, and it settles in the glass and it opens up the flavours for nosing. So it'd be good if you've got a tasting glass and we cover them while we lid, but if not, just pour it in a glass, let it sit there, and the flavours will open up when we come to talking about the whiskies. So Bowmore is the oldest distillery on Islay, one of the oldest in Scotland. We're one of a handful of distilleries that still have their own malt barns. We believe the tropical fruit notes that Bowmore's renowned for start out in the malt barns and get carried right through the process.
And that's maybe, David, that's maybe worth us picking up on the way that we actually dry our barley, because we dry it slightly different to other distilleries. We use a shorter drying period, which means that we get less intense phenolics on the spirit, and that helps to promote that. So maybe talk more about that, just about the drying period, how that differs to others.
Yeah, so we start drying it off when we add the peat smoke. We burn the peat smoke for 15 hours to get the 25 to 30 ppm, the phenols, the smokiness we're looking for. Coincidentally, Bowmore sits on the middle of Islay, and coincidentally, we're in the middle of the peated whiskies on Islay. Islay's famous for its peated whiskies. Traditionally, the north of Islay is very, very lightly peated. Traditionally, the south is very heavily peated. Coincidentally, Bowmore is in the middle of Islay, and our peating level is in between the north and the south.
And that balanced peaty level allows really the fruitiness to begin to show through at younger ages and really evolve over the period of maturation. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see ourselves, or call ourselves, a perfectly balanced Islay whisky. We've got the peat smoke there, but as Bowmore gets older, gets to 17, 18-year-old, the ripe fruits start turning into tropical fruit. So when we get to 17, 18, the ripe start turning into tropical, and the peat smoke dies down or camouflages between the fruits. So yeah, Bowmore matures really well in bourbon and sherry. So we've got some interesting drams to try, and as we go through the ages, you'll see how the peat smoke kind of dies down and the ripe fruits turn into tropical.
And as we think about the going deeper into the process here, David, you know, one of the conscious decisions that we make is to collect the clear wort. Could you maybe talk more about the clear wort, what we do there, and so how that impacts?
We stir very little when we're mashing, so the clear wort goes through. We run the mash tun very, very slowly. It's all about time, the art of time. We leave our fermentations for about 66 hours. So, and we use two different types of yeast. So the yeast works differently. The cocktails, the yeasts give the fruity flavours that we're looking for as well. So it's about the art of time as well.
And I'm assuming that if we don't employ the plough as much as perhaps was once done in the past, that forces less of the grain debris through, which means that we get less of these cereal notes, and it promotes that real fruity character that is so synonymous with Bowmore.
The wort is clearer, and it doesn't take any debris through or any bits of the grist, the draft coming through. So the clear wort, and with the yeast it becomes really active and it works really hard, and that's when we know that the fruity flavours are getting carried through from the malt barns.
And it's maybe worth mentioning here as well that when we talk about the two types of yeast, there are two different interactions in there, and what we're finding is that we get more complex flavours from two yeasts than one yeast, and that's obviously amplified the longer that the fermentation lies after the fermentation has ended. The longer the washback lies after fermentation has ended, that's when you get some of these really complex flavours that are present in Bowmore.
Absolutely. The two yeasts we use work slightly different. One of the yeasts works faster than the other, so it works at the beginning of fermentation. The other yeast kicks in towards the end of the fermentation, and it works right through the fermentation.
And it's important as well that we have a really active yeast in there, because we need that carbon dioxide layer to actually stop any other airborne infections that could come in, because as we know, yeast is all around us. So to really keep the pure heart of Bowmore, it's important we have a quick acting yeast that's going to go in and consume the sugar, produce the carbon dioxide, and give almost a level of protection against any other impregnation with bacteria. And that really keeps the flavour of Bowmore so clean and so crisp.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So
should we begin by trying the 12?
Yeah, the 12-year-old is bottled at 40%. This is a marriage of bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks. If you have a wee look at the colour, it's warm amber in colour. Have a wee smell. This one has got a really good nose. On the nose, you get vanilla, you get honey, you get lemon zest coming through. As we said earlier, Bowmore isn't too smoky, although Isla's famous for its smoky whiskies. You get the distinctive Bowmore smokiness in the background. To me, this is our 12-year-old in the core range. My favourite used to be the 15, but I think in the last year or two, the 12-year-old is fantastic quality. This is my favourite in the core range now. I think this is a fantastic value for money drinking whiskey.
I think what's really interesting about this is, David, I think you alluded to it earlier on, how the peatiness begins to drop off in the mid-teens, go down. I think what's really interesting about this is, even at a young age, we've kind of surpassed that medicinal characteristic that you see in the younger, more iodine, more maritime sort of vegetation notes, whereas this, it kind of moves into more that dry smokiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shows that lovely complex fruitiness underneath. But what I really like about this is it's got a nice balanced sweetness on the back of the palate.
It's warm, sweet. Yeah. You get the peat there. You get like that caramel. You get like the kind of ripe fruits coming through there as well, like the raisins, sultanas.
And I think it's a great everyday dram, David, because it's something that's complex. It's something that makes you think about it, but it's not something that tires your brain out by asking continuous questions about the spirit. Not one-dimensional, but certainly just a big hug in a glass.
Yeah,
it just to me speaks.
Fantastic.
To me, this is when you go to the distillery and you get out of the car and you can smell the malt barns, you can smell the kiln going. It really has all of these characteristics of the distillery there.
You get the maritime flavours coming through, the sea spray from a wild day as well.
And not aggressive or overpowering. I just see Steve McLaren there making a note just that not overpowering. And also want to give a shout out to Bernd Schaudin. We were actually speaking about you this morning, Mr. Schaudin, and how we haven't seen you on Isla, or I haven't seen you on Isla for a long time. So welcome today. What's really interesting about this is, Davey, I think, when a lot of people, Isla whiskey can be a love or hate. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. And I always say that if the first whiskey that you've ever tasted is a young Isla, you might think you've been poisoned because there's something that's a little bit weird and a little bit funky in there. And it's not until you understand that peatiness and the medicinal characteristics that come through really speaks. But to me, this is just the perfect balance of what Bowmore is. It's smoke, it's fruit, it's sweet. You can see the influence of the casks in there and the wood sugars and some of those creamy vanilla notes from the oak lactones that are higher in North American oak casks, but there's also a dryness that I think complements that smokiness coming through from the sherry casks in there. Well done. A tremendous dram.
We're lucky. Bowmore matures really well in bourbon and Oloroso sherry as well. So
what would you say is the sweet spot, David? If you were saying the sweet spot out of the Bowmore range, where do you think the real sweet spot is for Bowmore as a spirit? Or do you think there is a sweet spot?
No, I think Bowmore mature. I think you get the true distillery character shining through in the bourbon. I like Oloroso sherry. It's a good winter dram, but Bowmore really shines to me. I love the tropical fruit notes that old Bowmores and the younger ones are renowned for. So I would say we did a good. It shines at different ages. We did 15-year-old bourbon for festival 2 years ago. It's really tropical fruit notes. So yeah, once we get over the 25 year as well, I love the bourbon tropical fruits.
And it's worth mentioning that, with a bourbon cask, you've got more spirit in contact with the wood as it's maturing. So it will actually mature at a slightly higher rate than you'll see in the sherry casks, which tended to be why you saw the older sherry expressions that started at 10 years and went up to 15. And, modern approaches to science and woods is changing those slightly, but, traditionally, that's why you would see the bourbon casks at the lower end of the spectrum. Any more comments on the Bowmore 12, David? I'm assuming that this doesn't all mature in the number one vaults, that some of it's probably spent some time in there.
Yeah, some of it's matured from the number one vaults, but from our different warehouses as well.
And what have you got in the number one vaults just now, Davey? Is that what's maturing in there that we can?
We've got a lot of interesting stuff still to come from Bowmore. We've been doing small batches since 2016. Spirit made with 100% Bowmore malt. It was 5-year-old on the 27th of May. So we've been doing small batches, 100% floor malt each year. They're coming along really, really well. We've matured some of it in virgin oak, bourbon barrel. We've done some Oloroso hogsheads. We've done Oloroso butts, PX butts as well. So yeah, we've got some really interesting, good stuff to come.
Now, we've heard what you love about Bowmore. Have you ever seen an expression that you absolutely loathed?
I'm not a big fan of Bowmore Legend. I think it was not our best expression out there. Hence, that's why in the last few years we've turned from non-age back to age statements. And
I think that's a really interesting point that, Bowmore is still committed, I believe, to keeping age statements on our drams.
When you talked about young iodine whiskies earlier on, Legend was the first one that actually came to my mind and thought, God, thank God we've discontinued that whiskey.
Absolutely, and I think that's what I was talking about, when I'm talking about your first ever dram's an Islay dram and it's a young Islay. It has the potential to actually make you segue away because it's such a unique taste. And it's almost like an acquired taste. It's maybe like an olive. The first time you taste an olive, you think, oh, that's really not that pleasant. And then second time you taste it, it's not as bad. And then, by the third time you're sitting there and you're having a beer with some olives and you're really enjoying the combination together. And I think that's really interesting about Bowmore.
But that's all about the whiskey journey is about as well. You maybe start off in blends and then start moving towards Islay, going towards more peaty, but it's part of the experience and part of the journey, as we would say.
And that's an interesting point. Do you tend to pair your whiskies, if you're enjoying a whiskey at home, do you pair it with an occasion that maybe you're watching a movie, maybe you're reading a book, maybe you're doing something else and you have drams for those occasions, or is it pretty much
more seasonal on different types of food as well? I think bourbon goes really well in the summer, where white chocolate, lighter flavours, and in the winter the sherries go much better with like Christmas cake and more a winter dram, sitting drinking a sherry as well. So yeah, I think they're quite seasonal as well. That's the good thing about Bowmore. We've got the 12's a marriage of bourbon and sherry, but we've got some good expressions that are fully matured in bourbon and some that are fully matured in sherry. So
and I think
you can drink what you like.
I think we're going to taste two of those later on with the special editions, aren't we? We're going to see a bourbon maturation and a sherry maturation. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what these taste like because they literally just arrived in the post the other day. So took the packaging off today and interesting to see what you've been doing with that.
Yeah, definitely worth opening up, leaving them in the glass for a good 20 minutes before we taste them.
Now, tell me, when you're drinking whiskey around the world, if you're ever at events, do you find that there are different, ways that you enjoy it? Is it, do you enjoy it in a cocktail maybe in certain markets, or are you kind of straight up either on the rocks or just a little bit of water type?
I usually like just little bit of water or a splash, but if you go to different countries, if you go to Japan, you think, oh, highball, that'll be interesting to try. But when you're there with the humidity, the heat, the highball and Bowmore 12 is really refreshing. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And what's been your favourite market to visit?
I think China is my favourite market. I think it is, they have a wealth of knowledge. There is a lot of young people really interested in whiskey. There's a good mix between as many young women and guys, so it's good to see both sexes in it, and that are really young and they're really keen. Yeah, China has huge potential for Bowmore.
And I'm assuming when you've spent time in China and maybe in Japan, you've eaten some things that are perhaps not as common to Western palates as they are in the East. Was there anything that you've found worked particularly well? And was there anything that you began to make your blood run cold when you think, oh my God, that's going to be a challenge for me to eat this?
Yeah, no, the food's quite interesting and worth trying. But yeah, I was probably a wee bit, when I was younger, I would have been a wee bit politer and I would have tried to eat it. But as you get a wee bit older and you're there doing tastings every day, I kind of get to know the brand guys and say, don't be offended if I don't like this, but I don't have a good stomach and I'm not going to eat something that'll put me off doing a tasting tomorrow, because you're there and people are turning up to see you and get the best of you. So yeah, as you get older, you don't feel so obliged to eat stuff like that.
Is there anything that you found particularly worked with it? Anything you were surprised at and went, you know what, that is such a good combination, I would never have thought of that?
Yeah, some of the sushi dishes are really good with the Bowmore. The 12-year-old, the kind of maritime flavours come through well with the sushi and the seafood in Japan. China have got a lot of good, different, interesting dishes as well that go really well. The Chinese really.
What market would you most want to visit, David? If you could say tomorrow, take a trip this year, we want you to go and visit a market, your choice, your bucket list, where would it be?
One of the good things about COVID-19, hasn't been many good things about it, but one of the good things, I've done much more virtual stuff than traveling. So I've done a lot of stuff in the last 6 months with India. India is a huge up-and-coming market. I've done a few events with them online, and yeah, our 12-year-old has got great potential in India. So I'm really looking forward to start going to India. I've been there once on holiday, but I think it's an up-and-coming market for Bowmore as well.
And it's an interesting thought to pair spice with fire. You get the heat of alcohol, the spice of food. And actually thinking about it pragmatically, they shouldn't work together. But in some occasions, they actually do. And I think really interesting, you touched on it there, how, remember that alcohol is a poultice. You know, we cook with alcohol because it draws out flavour. It's almost like salt, yeah? And that can actually bring out some of the real flavours that are attributed to the spirits as well. What was your best facial memory? Have you got one in particular one that you can tell us?
Yeah, I think it was the year Eddie retired. We had some casks that are no longer here, and we did a tasting with 50-year-old bourbon and 50-year-old sherry. We had a wee dram of each at the end of his tour, and the tropical fruit notes were amazing in both these whiskies. Yeah.
It's really interesting because the more that the Bowmore oxidizes, or the Bowmore 12 oxidizes in the glass, that smokiness actually seems to ebb a little bit, and that fruitiness, that tropical fruitiness is really it's starting to open up. And that's probably only been sitting in that glass for about 15, 20 minutes. So really interesting, you know. Always think when people say don't spin a whiskey in a glass, a lot of nonsense, you know. When you've been locked up for 12 years, if we locked you up in a bottle for 12 years, what would you want to do when you get out? Probably slap us in the face would be the first thing you'd want to do. But the second would be to stretch and get to know your environment. And, you know, given that spin in the glass helps to oxidize that spirit, just allow the stronger vapors to die down, because the more volatiles are going to leap out and grab your nose. Well, thank you, David, for introducing us to Bowmore 12, and I'm sure you'll be joining us throughout the rest of this session.
Yeah, we've got some interesting whiskies to come.
I think we've got some super interesting whiskies to come, and without further ado, I think it's Scott Milne is going to join us now, and Scott is going to talk about the collectability of Bowmore, some of the expressions that he's been working on recently, and we're hopeful that we're going to actually begin to see if we can unwind what he's working on right now and give us a little bit of a heads up on what's happening. So Scott, welcome.
Thanks very much, Iain. Delighted to speak to everybody today, and hello to everybody around the world. And sorry we can't host you at the distillery this year, but we're looking forward to getting everybody back together, hopefully next year. But yeah, I mean, I guess I wanted to talk about what I do on Bowmore. I get to work on probably some of the most fantastic kind of projects in the industry. What we do is take some of Bowmore's most precious whiskies, some of our brilliant spirits that David and the team have put together, and we get to kind of, I guess, package them up, for you and for whiskey collectors out there. And one of the ones that I'm most proud of this year that we brought out in January was the Timeless series, which we've had amazing feedback on. People are really, really happy about it. The whiskey is absolutely incredible. If you buzz on one, Charlie, I can talk a bit about the kind of packaging. So we put together this incredible series that will be unveiled to you over the next couple of years. And the idea behind it is that we bottle truly timeless whiskies from our warehouse, ones that are chosen because they have this incredible Bowmore character. They're chosen at just the right time, and hence the focus on this beautiful hourglass and the wonderful kind of packaging that our team put together. But one of the, I guess, the best things about this project that we did at the start of the year was being able to work with some incredible artists and people who are really inspired by Bowmore. And I share these images because we worked together with a young French artist, and we're going to share a bit of a film on it shortly. But we essentially brought this young artist to Bowmore to soak up, I guess, what Islay is all about, what we all know and love, and really get inspired. This artist basically focuses on manipulating different liquids, different substances, and filming them very close up, and then manipulating that footage into this incredible spacescape. And he's worked in a number of different fashion brands around the world, and he's also, including Dior, and he's also been exhibited around the world as well. So we'll share a short piece about this. I think this, for me, really, I guess, imbues the character of Bowmore, but also just the lovely inspiration that that we all get from being on Islay. So if you can take it away, Charlie.
Creating an immersive film for Bowmore's new series Timeless was such a challenge. How exactly could I represent their obsession for precision craft, their love for whiskey in a contemplative, abstract and intense experience? First, I needed to feel the brand universe. What landscape, what sounds, what textures did they get their inspiration from? I would soon find these answers in the very center of Bowmore's heritage, its birthplace, Islay, in Scotland. Down there, you can feel immediately the nature having its own past, the millennial processes at work in the ground, peaceful but mineral landscapes, beautiful and harsh. This is where the origins of one of the greatest whiskies takes roots. Using only inks, paints, water and soil, I tried to recreate at a very small scale the memories I had from the island. Natural elements and essential ingredients to Bowmore's identity, and then try to transpose it at a monumental and cosmic scale. Then I had to process those shots in post-production, as the film is projected on a sphere in almost 360 degrees around the viewer. I realized how sensitive and intense the narration had to be. As it tells the story of a unique taste, and finally found my way to describe Bowmore's timeless.
Very good. So yeah, I mean, I hope you take away from that, I guess, the inspiration behind the series, also the amazing film that Thomas Vans created. And it's just a pleasure to work on such with such an incredible heritage, and I guess such a power to inspire others. And I guess moving on, speaking about inspiration.
Before we move on, it's an interesting thing that I don't think I've seen before until I saw it on the screen there. Was I had never actually picked up on the, call me stupid on this, I'd never actually picked up on the hourglass moment from it. When I looked at that, what I was thinking about was almost, you're wringing out, twisting the wood to extract every last drop of that liquor. So yeah, I've learned something today. Every day's a school day.
No, that's great. No, I mean, it's a beautiful shape, and it's something that we will kind of pick up on and use again. So no, absolutely. But yeah, so basically to kind of buzz on, another project that we worked on this year and that we're hugely proud of was the Black Bowmore archive cabinet. So you may have seen this, but if you didn't, it was basically a collection from the distillery of all 5, in our view, of Black Bowmore, put together from our archive. It was auctioned for charity, but the kind of way in which we put it together was, as we called it, the archive cabinet. And for that reason, it was essentially trying to capture the essence of what Black Bowmore was all about. And some of the real textures, the colours, the sensory elements of it. It was amazing to work with a guy called John Galvin, who we work with quite a lot, actually. He's the gentleman who also does some of the packaging work on our 1965, our 50-year-olds, and is continuing to do that. But the amazing element that I just loved from this was, I guess, the real natural raw materials that we're able to use from Scotland. You've got fantastic oak and wood, but also from the distillery. We used, so in the top right, that is basically wood that came from the distillery. It came from number 1 washback. It's got that brilliant blackness coming from the iron hoops, but also the kind of colour of the wood there as well. And then we also used the spirit safe and kind of repurposed that. The spirit safe was taken out, I think it was last summer sometime, and replaced just as part of natural maintenance to the distillery. And it was a real chance to, I guess, capture the heritage and the story of what's going on at Bowmore.
To have a nice feel to it, that you still feel that the spirit safe is still the custodian of the stock after all these years. It protected the integrity of the stock at the start and still doing it now. Interesting. I was speaking to John, and he was explaining to me the glass making process for the glass blocks, and I was asking him, what was the hardest thing for you to do? And he said, believe it or not, it was the glass. The glass gave him such a problem with the size and the weight of the glass, and trying to get the look of the glass. I want to bring that to you, Scott. What was your biggest challenge? Because that was his challenge in terms of working with the materials to bring this to life. What was your biggest challenge as a marketeer, and to actually bringing this from an idea to actually the fruition?
I think one of the biggest challenges was actually, I guess, COVID was one. So I'd say one was, going through COVID at this time when we had shutdowns. We had a kind of end goal in mind where we wanted to raise money for charity in April. We needed to hit that deadline, so we had shutdowns in Scotland. We had time where we weren't spending, kind of working on it. I think the other piece was actually the glass. With this process that our craftsmen went through, the glass had been prepared in such a special way. Actually, the first 5 pillars that came out all fractured. So we actually lost a lot through that, and lost a lot of time. So it was.
And I believe the first pillar came out perfectly. Was that right? And then everyone that followed was. So they thought they had nailed the process.
Yeah.
And then when they went to repeat the process, they found that they were having all sorts of atmospheric challenges.
Issues. Yeah, and these things were just works of art. When they were finally finished, the most beautiful things to look at. They were hand carved. They had materials that basically kind of made them turn from black up the very top to clear down the bottom to kind of mirror the aging of the spirit. And the element I love, my favorite thing about this is basically the taps that were on the original spirit safe. The patina from the fingertips, the little acids that are in there. Since I think it's the 1920s, I think we kind of 1920s, 1930s they were installed. But just the fact that you've got that and that is on the original pools was just amazing to capture. So a real amazing project and a real amazing amount raised for Islay charities as well. It goes back to the community and kind of keep the story living on, I guess, in my view.
And it's amazing to see the spirit of, you've got to think of these distillers way back in 1950s through the 60s actually producing this, and to think that you've actually got their fingerprints of that kind of makes sends a chill down your spine to think how many hands actually touch that spirit.
Absolutely.
Just hope now people enjoy it.
No, absolutely. So I think we're tasting the 15, are we?
Yeah, we're tasting the 15.
Which is a real honour, because honestly, the 15 in my view is the best one. It's my personal favourite. But it's an absolute classic in my view. It is the ultimate Bowmore for me, anyway. And the thing that I remember even before I worked on Bowmore actually was how good the 15 was. But I worked at other industry businesses, and when the original, the original whiskey came out long ago, it was just revered and has ever been since. So it's definitely a favourite for me. Don't know about you.
And yeah, I love it. It's I think what's really interesting about this is it's a finish. So the secondary maturation is a shorter period than the initial maturation, meaning it's a finish. One is the colour. You can see the real difference in colour, even if you contrast that. And I know the glasses are slightly different here, so they won't show up as well. But there's a real dark, almost mahogany style colour. What I really love about this is that, much as David said earlier on, you start to see about 15 years old, maybe about 14, 15 years old, you start to see that smokiness taper off. And it starts to allow you to see more of the fruity flavours that lie underneath. But interesting with this, when I compare it to the 12, with the 12, I'm getting more of that light, fresh fruitiness. I find with this, I'm getting more of that raisin, almost dates, that sticky, sweet, almost stone fruit. Maybe almost a little bit overripe where it begins to get funky. But then that smokiness comes in and brings it into great balance. Gavin Ryan Thompson, I've got a face for radio. Unfortunately, they put me on TV today, so we'll keep on going with it. But thanks for the compliment, my friend. But really, a real depth of character to this spirit. I don't get the medicinal characteristics that you see in the younger Bowmore. I get that almost earthy smokiness. I think when I nose this, it's almost like licking the damp embers of a bonfire. If the rain come on around a bonfire and you get that slightly oily character coming out of the oak as well, you get the residual smokiness that's maybe been subdued with the moisture. But sorry, I've just snorted some whiskey and that's not a pleasant experience. Put me completely off my train of thought there. But there's also a delicious nuttiness that I see, coming through, almost like a hazelnut that gives it a little bit more viscosity in the mouth in the 12-year-old. And, I think the 12-year-old is a great aperitif, great to line up a dinner, great with seafood, great with an amuse-bouche. for me, something like this is your coffee, your cocoa, your chocolate, your dessert. And, you know, I know nowadays we don't talk so much about smoking, but it actually pairs really well as an after dinner glass with a nice cigar as well, where you get those earthy notes in the cigar coming through and really just uplifted, I think, by the spirit. It's just a joy in a glass, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
delicious. It's absolutely fantastic. No, it's absolutely my after dinner go-to. It's the dessert in a glass. You know, it's so rich and full. I just absolutely love it.
Now, tell us, is there another whiskey that you particularly enjoy that's not in our portfolio, or?
A good question. I mean, I'm a bourbon man myself, so I tend to go for makers. Actually, if it's pre, you know, that's the life of the party. It's got energy. It's really exciting. But you know, in terms of single malt, I would have to, you know, go to our kind of Japanese whiskies for me. You know, and Yamazaki is just stunning. You know, it's just the having been there myself, having the privilege to actually go across and see what they do and see, you know, the craftsmanship that goes in there is just absolutely incredible. So
when you think at one distillery we produce one style, and at Yamazaki we can produce over 70 different styles of whiskey, and if you add that onto Hakushu, we're talking over 110, 115 styles of whiskey, which seems crazy. But you know, I think another thing I would love to hear a little bit more about, I get sent a little gift in the post. Aston Martin Bowmore, and I thought you might be the man to tell us a little bit more about this. Sadly, it's not a sample of the whiskey. The glasses came empty. This is typical Scott Milne and Bowmore. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the Aston Martin partnership.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's really exciting from our point of view. We've done a few things with Aston Martin. You know, we announced the partnership, I believe it was 2 years ago, just in October. And really, you know, the reason for us to join forces was because working with the Aston team, there is, you know, a real mirror, you know, in the sense of their beliefs, their values. You know, I've toured the Aston Martin kind of factory, and the way they create cars is utterly incredible. It is slow compared to the very fast, you know, kind of world of car manufacture. They take absolute precision in every detail. You know, they are kind of their attention to detail is stunning, but also their I guess love of heritage. They call it soul. So every car that they have has a soul, and actually every Bowmore for me has a soul. Right, every Bowmore has that eternal character. And right up to, you know, the way that the staff really love the brand as well. You know, meeting some of the Aston team, there are people who will work on the fabric stitching in the classic car area. This is, but they'll actually find their grandfather's signature underneath the leather, you know, on a seat that they're repairing. You know, and actually that really rhymes with what happens at Bowmore in terms
That's an interesting point, because this is a whiskey that caused a family feud in my family, because my brother works for the competition, Bentley. He said, why weren't you doing something with Bentley? Why were you doing it with Aston Martin? I'm like, well, you know, James Bond, Aston Martin, you don't really think about him and Bentley. And so that was the way that I got out of that. But one thing I do want to ask you, Scott, is what is your most memorable Bowmore experience? What really brought you to, I love this, I get this. It's almost become a way of life as opposed to a job. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Do you know what? It was actually second week of the job. So I had started from another distiller. I had moved into Bowmore. My first task, I believe it was actually launching the final Black Bowmore, the 50-year-old that we launched, and it was attending the dinner. You know, most of the people I was meeting afresh. I think I'd met maybe David, you know, at some whiskey fairs previously.
Yeah.
Got to sit next to Eddie. You know, I got to meet David. I got to hear Eddie's story, and I guess just the magic and the aura in the room around the fact that you've got, you know, one of the guys taking the reins with such heritage and history within, you know, the whiskey and the distillery, and another, you know, gentleman who I only knew for, you know, 2 weeks, but he was passing over the reins, and to hear that story and the stories of the distillery and just kind of almost take a moment. It was very ethereal, and the experience of tasting Black Bowmore in that atmosphere was just incredible. So
I think it's funny you mentioned.
That was the
funny
match.
You mentioned Eddie. I've got slightly different. I first went to Bowmore. I think it was. Now I'm going to show my age. I think it was 1997. And at the time, I was based at Auchentoshan, but sent over to Bowmore to learn the distillation process at Bowmore. And the first job they gave me was into the malt barns with David and Eddie. So that was my first job. I arrived off the flight, 10 o'clock in the morning, into the malt barns after they gave me a pair of overalls. And I remember after the first week having a real problem with my shins, because on the barrows, which we turn out the malt, there was a bar on the bottom. And for some reason, it kept catching me on the front of my shins. I was thinking, this is really sore. I don't see anybody else moping about. And so I said to Eddie, I think it was like the Thursday or the Friday, I was like, Eddie, I'm having a real problem with this. It's like skinning my shins. They're just swelling up. It's uncomfortable to walk. He went, well, boy, you see, we taught you how to do it the wrong way, and now next week we'll show you how to do it the right way. So there was an interesting way in inducting you into the Islay family that I think, really stands you up to love these brands when you interact with the people. That for me is as much as the spirit sometimes.
Absolutely. And I just want to call out, where I mentioned there, Gordon Dundas, who has worked with him for a long while, so hello to him. We're missing you as well. I guess also we've got another guest just now, and I guess I'll give him a bit of an introduction. But we worked on the archive cabinet, which we sold in Hong Kong with our partner Sotheby's. Johnny's good friend, who we work very closely with the team at Sotheby's in kind of raising money for charity. But I think over the last wee while we've seen a large boom in collectability, and there's lots of drive to kind of pick up bottles. The interesting thing is they don't always need to be hugely expensive. Some of the things that people are collecting now are good prices, and you don't need a huge amount of money to start a collection. But we thought we'd bring Johnny on just to have a bit of chat about us and taste the dram as well. So I guess
fantastic.
Hello, Johnny.
Hey everyone. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
You've caught me just unpeeling my Bowmore 15.
Very good. Very good. Well, I guess, Johnny, if you could give us a bit of introduction to yourself and what you do at Sotheby's, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Johnny Fowle. I am the senior specialist in the whiskey department at Sotheby's. So I've only been at Sotheby's for about 2 years, and we only started our whiskey sales in earnest in 2019, around the time I joined. So we sit within the wine department at Sotheby's, which has been going since 1970. And actually the first ever wine auction we did was in Glasgow. So there's a good Scottish link with Sotheby's. But it's been about 2 years so far for the whiskey department. But we've had an enormous amount of success. We've seen the Scotch market boom and the Japanese market boom, and the American whiskey market is really booming at the moment as well. So it's been really fantastic for me. It's a great time to join. And I think probably everyone on this call, both speaking and tuning in, is well aware of how much whiskey's grown over the last few years. And so, I'm aware that I talk about collectible whiskey a lot, and that's not to say that I'm completely single-minded about the top end of the market. Obviously, I love whiskey across the board, and I think the other thing that's important to mention is that when I talk about collectible whiskey, I don't talk about investing in whiskey. I'm really into whiskey for the love of drinking it and appreciating it. So I think that's probably the cornerstone of my involvement in the industry, is to try and encourage people to keep drinking, keep opening bottles, and to try and get bottles from old collectors to new collectors, and try and propagate the the secondary market in whiskey as much as I possibly can.
What do you think drove the investability in, I'm not even sure if that's a word, or for people investing in Scotch whisky as opposed to other spirits? Because we've seen people gravitate from wine to, do you think it's something to do with the bouquet? Do you think it's something to do with the flavour profile, the complexity? Why wasn't that bourbon that was taking that lead? Why wasn't Irish whisky, which is arguably coming up now, but why wasn't it that really took the bait?
It's sort of hard to put your finger on, isn't it? I mean, like, there could be a lot of different reasons. I think the main thing probably is the involvement of Asia in whiskey buying, particularly China. I mean, it's just the fact that Scotch whisky as an industry opened itself up and put a concerted effort into selling into East Asia particularly. And, as soon as you add in however many billion people to the game, competition goes up and prices go up.
I think it's interesting as well that when you think about companies didn't think that whiskies were collectible. When we were issuing the first Black Bowmore, we had no idea. We thought £200 a bottle, that's obnoxious. That's never going to sell. And now you look and go, bottle the three, if you get them together, you're £26,000.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting one. I guess I look at sort of a few different points of collectability generally, and I think Bowmore is pretty interesting because it covers all three. You've got your kind of super rare whiskies. So the Bowmore 1957 is, I think, is only 12 bottles released. I think that's the most valuable bottle of Bowmore as well. And that's sort of hyper rare, super aged. Only a few people are going to get their hands on it, so the price is high. But then you have Black Bowmore, which is, I mean, it was released and it was valuable at the time and expensive, but it was so good that the price has just gone up because everyone drank them, and everyone who didn't drink them wants to drink them. And it's interesting to think of, I think of Black Bowmore as one of those sort of, it's really like a central theme of whiskey collecting, where pretty much every whiskey collector I know has either drunk it or wants to drink it or has it in their collection. It's a must-have, isn't it?
I think one of the things that maybe alerted us first to the trend of people collecting whiskey was counterfeits began to appear. And suddenly this was a whole new thing to us, because previously if people had asked for labels, collecting labels, like stamp collectors, we would send the labels, and then we started to find that some of these were coming back to, we actually had an interesting conversation with talking about the 1957. So up in Edmonton in Alberta, there was a ram raid on a shop when we launched in 1957, and somebody took the bottle hostage. And about 6 months later, so in this interim period of 6 months, we've been in every major TV network in America on their primetime news. We've been in every radio show pretty much throughout the Canadian provinces and America. And we got a phone call from a lawyer in Florida to say, hey, I've got your bottle, 20 grand or the bottle gets it. And I'll never forget the conversation. It was, honestly, keep the bottle. We couldn't have got that amount of PR for £20,000. So we're entirely happy that you've, blown this out. Still, when I go up into the Canadian provinces, people still talk about, have you ever, it's almost like finding a missing ocean liner or something that's sunk and we don't, aircraft. It's almost like, have you found this? And we're like, no, we're pretty sure that somebody probably spanked the bottle anyway and was just sending back the empty bottle. So interesting.
Unless it turns up at auction.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen a few of them as well. We've seen a few.
Yeah, that one will go at a premium at auction, I think.
Yeah. Just on that point, what are you seeing in terms of counterfeit, Johnny? Is that something that you're seeing as a bigger challenge as we move forward, or is it something now that the industry is getting a handle through modern technology, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, but I think as long as you do your due diligence, and also, I mean, I think that the industry has so many super knowledgeable people that, and it's quite, we're quite a community-driven industry. So you can lean on people to say, hey, what do you think about this bottle? I've got questions on it. People weigh in, and there tends to be a consensus. So, I mean, you do see fake whiskies cropping up here and there. We go through every bottle individually, so we'll assess every single bottle, and we don't have enormous sales like 10,000 bottles. We have like 100 bottle sales. Like our current auction has, I think, 93 bottles in the wholesale. So we tend to keep it pretty lean, and we're cautious. but there are enough people out there who can spot a fake from
I
a
think
mile
some of
away,
our
so.
biggest allies there are the malt maniacs, because these guys can tell you from something on the label, looking at a photograph, something on the cap. I mean, they're almost forensic in their detail. They're going down to, looking at the size. And so tip my hat to Serge Valentin and co for, trying to keep this industry honest.
Yeah, Serge is good. There's a little section on his website, War on Fakes. And then Emmanuel Dron as well. His book was enormously helpful. I mean, everyone who works in whiskey auctions or the secondary market has that book.
And if you ever do get a chance to go to Singapore, you should go and see Emmanuel Dron in his bar, because he has a spectacular whiskey collection. And you know what? Just him and his wife, lovely couple, just lovely people that super passionate about whiskey.
Yeah, that was the first ever Bowmore bouquet bottle I saw, was in the Old Alliance in Singapore. That was the first time actually when I went into that bar that I realized, I think that was probably the biggest collection I'd seen in one place. It was the first time I'd seen a bar stocked with so many, not just so many whiskeys, but so many rare whiskeys. And I think Emmanuel's bar probably made me realize the extent to which people do and can collect, and open up the world of like, okay, this goes way beyond Scotland. This is an international drink, and you've got to go to the other side of the world to see the extent of the collecting.
And I think it's super interesting to see what impact a small country of 5 million people can have around the world through our national drink. Usually people they've either got a great story about Scotch whisky, they've got a horrendous story about Scotch whisky. It was either a really good experience, a really bad hangover, put them off whisky for a while. But what I always find about Scotch whisky is there's always a conversation. If you walk into a bar and you're on your own, no matter where you are in the world, if you order a vodka and Coke, the bar person will give you your vodka and Coke and usually leave you alone. If you order a whisky, the amount of times that organic conversations actually develop just from, especially if you have a Bowmore and it's sitting on the bar, the person having their Sauvignon Blanc beside them is thinking, well, there's a little bit of, did they have a fire in the vineyards? Because I'm suddenly getting burnt notes in here. And it's actually just that transient smell that wafts across that I think brings people together.
Yeah, so there's something about, every time we go to Isla or to Bowmore, there's that, the peaty smell, like, it's on my clothes when I leave. Like, you can tell it from a mile away. They always say you should never open a peaty whiskey indoors, because it'll ruin everyone else's day.
Is there one whiskey you've seen in the auction that you really thought, I really wish that bottle was mine?
Yeah, for me, the Bowmore bouquet is if I could buy any whiskey in the world, I would buy that one.
Try and find a 23-year-old port matured Bowmore. It's got a little hint of that in there. We haven't done it in a good number of years, but you can begin to see that from that mid-80s through that begins to give it that unique character.
So the kind of the sort of perfume note?
Absolutely. Some people love it. Some people absolutely hate it. And I'm sure we've got a lot of collectors on this call. I know we've got some collectors. I've seen some of the names crop up. Obviously, as people, maybe buy bottles for grandchildren to keep them over a long time. I know I do that for my nieces and nephews, just something for them. Have you got any tips on how we can protect the integrity of our bottles so that we don't go back after 10 years and find that it's all disappeared and we're left with a bottle that smells really nice but has no value to us either to drink or maybe to trade on?
Right, yeah. So you have to protect. So number one, the label, which obviously is the least important part, but does matter. So you don't want it to, don't leave it in somewhere where it's going to get damp or get anything sprayed in it or whatever. Try and keep it inside its box if that exists. Keep it with its box. Or a lot of people wrap them in cling film even if they're being super cautious. And then obviously don't leave them lying on their side like a bottle of wine. Leave them standing up. And try and leave them somewhere cool and dark. So actually, even just before this, I mean, the sun's been shining in Edinburgh today, and I left my box of little tasters on the side for about an hour. And when I pulled them out, I mean, the liquid's really warm. And I just thought, wow, that's like 1 hour in the sun. If you leave your whiskey somewhere where the sunshine's going to hit it, then it's going to make the color fall out of solution. It's going to make the liquid evaporate out through the cork, and you're going to be left with an ullaged bottle that's not going to be much use to anyone by the time you finish. And you do see bottles where they start here, and then by the time they come to auction, they're about down here, and they sit on the shelf generally.
And the oxidation can really impact it. It's funny, direct sunlight's the way that we've always told people, keep it, whatever you can do, keep it out of sunlight. Nice to. I wondered when I saw sunshine. I thought you must be in Edinburgh, but you'll probably be aware of this, Johnny, staying up in Scotland, that we have a saying in Scotland, which west is best. So unfortunately, you're as close to heaven as you'll get, but it's 35 miles across the motorway in the city of Glasgow. Which brings me to the Bowmore 18. Because we talked with David at the start. It's, a young Bowmore is about those medicinal characteristics that come through, from decaying maritime vegetation that forms the peat. And we take our top peats because they have more of that root system in there and more of that debris in there as well. The deeper we go with our peat, the less of that debris is there. And it would mean that the peat would create more heat and it wouldn't create the same fragrance. So when you're thinking about Bowmore, remember, it's always the top one or two peats. And when you actually think about going top peat to second peat, you're talking about 1,500 years of evolution. So every time you get to your glass and it's got a little bit of Bowmore peat in it, it's got that 1,500 years of evolution in there. But we move from that medicinal characteristic in the younger, where it moves into that sort of smokiness, that dry smokiness about the 12 years old. You're getting into that richer, more viscous with the 15, with the tannin coming in to complement the smoke, just as it's tapering off, and more of that fruitiness lying underneath. When you get to the 18, this is the first one that you see the major transition, that when you pick it up, it's not smoke forward on the nose, it's fruit forward on the nose. And that smoke is almost a wisp on the aftertaste. And especially when you taste this, I think you can see some of that, not that bouquet characteristic, that FWP Parma Violet style in there, but you do see that fruitiness coming through, and it's almost a candied fruitiness, which I think you can begin to, see some of that characteristic there. That is just, when you're sitting at 1:30 in an afternoon and it's 80 degrees in Chicago and bright blue sunshine, Scotch whiskey is the last thing that you should actually enjoy. But I find that this has got a wonderful acidity to it. So it's got a fruitiness, it's got an acidity. Just as you're beginning to think it dries, you begin to salivate, it brings in that acidity, and then that smokiness just wraps it up. This is just you could bathe in this stuff, couldn't you? You could really use it sort of aftershave, a little dab here and dab there, because it's got that wonderful oakiness coming through. And I think what's interesting, Scott, when you talk about bourbon, I'm not as big a lover of bourbon, and you can imagine living in the USA, that doesn't make me popular sometimes. But what I find with bourbon is it's so overly woody for me. I almost think bourbon is almost like licking the inside of a pencil case. That's just what it is to me, because you get that dominant woodiness that you see in young bourbons. But I think what's interesting here is with good maturation, you can get up to that 18, and while you see the the woodiness complement the whiskey, it doesn't in any way dominate the characteristics. It really allows that best balanced style to show through. You're still seeing the smoke, you're still seeing the fruit, you're still seeing the acidity. They're just in a slightly different order that makes it interesting for the brain to process. So a real triumph in a glass, David. Well done.
Yeah, the 18-year-old, I had a bottle of this in my bag when it was about 2017. I went something like 20 countries with a Bowmore 18 in my bag, and then ended up finishing the bottle. I bought some more at duty free. We went into Ladakh in the north of India. We were in a war zone having a Bowmore tasting on the Pakistan border, like up in the mountains there. And so this is like it's a whiskey that for me, with Bowmore, this is quite an important one for me, the 18-year-old.
I was going to ask you one of your most interesting stories, but I think you just came clean with it there yourself. I think I've done. I've been stuck in Europe when the volcano erupted. I was stuck in New York when the hurricane struck. Yeah, I had literally just left Japan when the tsunami struck. But I've never actually been to a war zone to present whiskey, and I take myself as quite fortunate in that. It's not something, I'm not entirely jealous of your experience there. While it'd be lovely to see Northern India, I tend to think of Bowmore bringing people together. If they're having an argument and a disagreement, pour a dram of Bowmore, sit down, and let's solve that problem. So perhaps, that's what we needed to do up there, was just, Scott, we need to ship more Bowmore 18 up to that area of the land. But, thank you for joining us today, Johnny, and thank you for your wonderful insights, and please continue to join us through the rest. Scott, thank you for your wonderful insights, and to see that cabinet bring tear to a glass eye, to see the patina about the waves and the way that you looked at the sand and how you tried to capture that to see the acidulated fingerprints of our distillery workers still having almost their DNA on the product. And I mean, the spirit safe, just there's something romantic about that you think this spirit safe was the first thing to kiss that spirit when it came off the still, and still all these years later it's protecting the integrity of the spirit. So well done, a wonderful piece of living art, my friend. And I think now we're going to be joined by Linda, and Linda's going to give us a little bit of background on the VC Centre and life in Islay in general. How are you, Linda?
Hi, I'm great. Sitting here enjoying these lovely drams. Missing everyone though. I'm sitting in the visitor centre, up in the bar, completely alone with my whisky. So it's really sad that everybody can't be here. I would normally have quite a lot of mess to be tidying up right now, and I'd still be having a few drams as well. So.
And you'd probably be nursing a bad hangover as well. That's the usual. So tell us, what's changed on Islay over the last year, Linda? I can imagine a lot.
A lot. So our job in the visitor centre has changed a lot. When the whole pandemic kicked off, the visitor centre closed back in March. Closed until September, and we opened the doors back up. Very different. No tours, no tastings. We have been running the distillery gift shop, shipping stuff out and chatting to people more on the phone and on the internet more than face to face. So we've learned lots about technology over the last 12 months, definitely, but missing all of our lovely visitors. I really wish you could all be here. I wish we were all sharing drams and all the craziness was there. I wish I could see you all in the queue outside the distillery. So hopefully next year, hope you've all got your ferry bookings for 2022 and we can get back to normal and have a lovely big party. Yeah.
Awesome. So as we're thinking about the visitor centre and you're telling us there's modern technology coming in, what have you been doing? What's been your most exciting thing that you've been doing over the last year? Is there anything that you found, wow, this is a real opportunity here that we probably wouldn't have had before COVID?
Yeah, I guess the festival moving into this virtual space, oh hi Gordon, has been a huge thing for us. Hopefully lots and lots of people who have never heard of Islay before, have never heard of the festival, will have joined in with us, and we'll get even more visitors the next time. We've done our very first ever ballot for Bowmore through the visitor centre, which was a huge learning curve for us. So really hope that all of your bottles got to you safely, and our tasting packs that we've just done as well. The visitor centre team have worked hard putting those tasting packs together and all the little bits that go in it and the information brochure. So yeah, taking on lots more of a virtual role, and we're working in marketing, learning lots more about the marketing side of things as well from the visitor centre. So, but we are missing everyone.
And what would you say has been your biggest personal challenge over the last year?
Probably learning how to work all this technology and having phone like video conferencing calls every day, and yeah, having to try and do your hair before you go to work, and just getting to grips with all the technology really has been the biggest challenge.
And this year must be quite different as well to any previous years in your career.
Yeah, very different. I think all the people who work in the visitor centre are people. You know, we love to chat. We love to just go and spend 2 hours in the warehouse talking to people and hearing their stories and where they've come from and why they're on Islay and getting all the chat. So we're very much missing that. It's a very different job. But hopefully, with all the changes that we've had with restrictions in the last few days in Scotland, we're going to be able to start opening things back up and open those warehouse doors again. I'm just so desperate to get people back into the #1 vaults and get those casks open. We've got some beautiful casks down in the warehouse that we pick out for our vault tours, and no one's been able to taste them. They've been sitting there having a big long sleep. So we want to get the Valentia out, get those open, share a few drams with everybody, definitely.
Now, a question I've been wanting to ask you for a long number of years, and I keep on forgetting about, Linda, is How many years have you worked at Bowmore?
I started in 2008, so I think this is my 13th year at the distillery now.
So you were pretty much round about the first Fèis. That's when we started working. Actually, no, there was maybe a couple of Fèises before that, wasn't there?
Couple of Fèises with Fèis bottlings. I mean, the festival itself, like the whole Islay Festival, started in 1986.
Yeah.
So it's always been around. It's always been part of my life. But yeah, for the distilleries getting involved and limited editions, I've been there for quite a lot of the festivals.
Now, as a Port Ellen girl, now you maybe heard me speaking to Johnny about West is best there and how Glasgow's better than Edinburgh. As a Port Ellen girl, what made you see the light and want to work at Bowmore and not one of the Port Ellen style distilleries?
Well, I suppose I've never been completely a Port Ellen girl. My family are from Bowmore. My mum's from Bowmore. My grandparents were from Bowmore. I went to the Gaelic unit, so I actually went through the whole primary school in Bowmore. So I'm very much an in-between Bowmore and Port Ellen girl, but both beautiful villages, both have lots of exciting things. But Bowmore Distillery, I just fell in love with it the minute I walked through the doors, really. I
think that's the nice thing about the distillery is that we've got so many people that have been there for such long periods of their life. You know, in some cases, working for the company, you know, more than half their lifetime. That's really interesting. And I think that's something that really speaks to Bowmore and makes Bowmore stand out, is that real warmth of feeling that you get, whether it was passing Ginger in the warehouses when he was moaning about something, or, you know, you would ask Big Willie a question and he would go away for 20 minutes and then come back and give you the answer, or, you know, Angus, who just talked all the time. I think that's magical. What is your favourite experience at Bowmore? What if you could say that was the best day that I had at Bowmore? Was there anything in particular?
Oh, there's been so many, but just touching on what you just said there about all the guys that work in the distillery. When I started working here, Eddie, who everyone's mentioned today, was the distillery manager. He worked at Bowmore for 50 years, so he'd worked in every different part of the distillery. And I remember the first time that Eddie took me around Bowmore, it was as if he was showing me around his home. Yeah. You know, it just made you feel so welcome, and everything that he said about the distillery came from the heart. You could see how proud he was to work here and to be the manager of Bowmore Distillery, and I think that pride has kind of filtered down to all of us that have worked with Eddie. So yeah, that's it. But lots of crazy memories from the distillery. We've been talking about some stories that I'm not going to say on film, but
I know where you live, Linda. What's your favourite expression of, if you've had a really rough day or something's really, you know, exhausting, what's your desert island dram? What's that kind of dram that you pour at the end of the night just to really relax and unwind?
This is a tricky one. However, I think COVID and being on Islay is as close to a desert island as I'm going to get. And the whiskey that I've been drinking throughout the sort of lockdown period was actually a Bowmore 19-year-old, matured in Bordeaux red wine casks, which is an Amazon exclusive. And that is my wee treat to myself. I've finished that bottle now, so I'm going to buy a new one. But wine casks and port casks are flavours that I absolutely love in Bowmore. I think the wine and the port casks can really complement our sort of tropical fruity base and pull some of those flavours out. I know it's controversial. Not everybody is in love with wine and port casks, but I like port.
Yeah, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, Linda. You know, if you enjoy it, that's the most important thing. And you know, we've used that analogy of coffee. How do you take your coffee? With sugar, with milk, without sugar, without milk, with sugar and without milk? You know, nobody ever says, "Oh, you're wrong for taking your coffee that way." And I think that's most important to say about, you know, whiskey as well. Is it's your whiskey, enjoy it your way. If you like to add water, feel free. If you like to add ice, feel free. If you like to drink it in a cocktail, feel free. And if anybody tells you can't do that, you have to question where their motive is coming from, because it should all be about enjoyment. And sometimes these are the things that will actually shock you. You're waking up and think, "Oh, that was quite good. I didn't expect that to be good." Now, where's your favourite place on Islay, apart from your house and apart from Bowmore Distillery? Where's your favourite place on Islay to enjoy a dram?
Oh, there's so many beautiful places around the island, and if any of you watched any of the kind of footage that we put together earlier on in today's programme, you'll have seen some of these beauty spots. For me, I love to enjoy a whisky by the beach. If you've got a little beach fire on the go, even better.
Linda, just a question. How do you like that beach fire and the gale force wind that is perpetually enveloping Islay?
Throw a wee bit of whisky on it.
I say that from experience, having lost my fingertips a number of times trying to start fires and keep people warm.
Well, we learned how to light a cigarette at quite an early age in the wind on Islay when we were teenagers. So you just need to put your back to the wind, and it's fine. But yeah, lots of beautiful places. Bridgend Woods, I would say, is one of my absolute favourite places to go for a walk. And if you take a wee flask of whisky with you.
There is something about Bridgend Woods that has always freaked me out. And it's what freaks me out about it, Linda, is it seems so ancient that you almost feel like the trees are staring at you. You almost feel the presence of, and I'm not a spiritual person at all, but you do feel in that area there is something that's almost as if you can hear the Vikings marching up to Finlagan, or the old carts going past. It's almost as if that, just particularly that one little field at the start of the woods, with the old, ancient, narrow trees just as you go through Bridgend, that has always really, before you get Heather Bald's house, the place I'm talking about on the right-hand side. But that has always had a real, I don't know, like there's something magical.
There definitely is. I think you're so closed in, you can't see any of the outside kind of world. You would think that you were just walking through an ancient woodland and you could go back in time. Yeah.
So, I think now we're about to welcome David Turner back, where we're going to look at the two exclusives for Bowmore. But Linda, don't go just yet, because I've been told I have to put a plug in here for the Islay Wave Fund. So the FAISH committee has collected together all the bottles and expressions. So there's some gin in there, I believe. There's some beer in there, as well as an expression from each of the distilleries their Fégile offering. And the tickets are available at fégile.co.uk for about £25, I think. I almost said $25. I've been living in the US for too long there. And I've just seen, Linda, can you join us for the tasting? I think we'll just keep you online for the tasting. Charlie's saying.
Absolutely. So, but that is a fantastic competition that the festival committee are running. You could potentially win every single festival bottle from every distillery, and even if you don't win, £25 is going back into the island. So all these lovely people who've been missing all the visitors all this time, the money's going to go back in to help future projects for Islay. So really worthwhile.
Just one question before we go. If it wasn't a Bowmore, what would be your Islay drama choice?
So it's a hard one. There's two distilleries that are very close to my heart. The first one is Killila. Killila has a very similar flavour profile to Bowmore. So the Killila 12-year-old, absolutely beautiful.
Stunning.
I actually started my life in whisky at Killila. So before I came to work at Bowmore, I'd done a seasonal job for about 6 or 7 months at Killila. I didn't know anything about whisky. I thought all whisky tasted the same. And I tasted all these lovely whiskies at Killila. I smelled all the smells of the distillery. I learned so much from Marjorie and Ruth at Lagavulin and from Flora and Billy at Killila. So I would say Killila 12-year-old.
I think that's I think, do you know what? I think I'm kind of with you on the Killila 12-year-old, because they do an on-peated and a peated, don't they? I think they do part and part, and I think the peated is stunning. I think I'm with you on that, and I think maybe it's just what you're used to. That I still at times struggle with Lafroig, especially if it's a warmer day and it's such a big bouquet of beautiful whiskey, but that's something I associate with winter in Chicago. Whereas I kind of find that Bowmore's got that all year round approachability. So without further ado, I think we're going to invite back our special guest, the distillery manager, David Turner, and he's going to take us through the two expressions that were released recently. We have an 18-year-old and we have a 23-year-old. So what can you tell us about the 18-year-old, David? I'm assuming it's a sherry cask, judging by the colour over here.
So first of all, it's a 3,000 bottle release. It's first fill Oloroso butts. There's 6 of them in this bottling, so it's limited edition of 3,000 bottles. It's at set strength, 51.2%. We thought when we tasted these casks They were a bit higher. They were 54 going on 55. So we took them down to 51.2. We thought that was a perfect bottling strength to get the flavours, what we were looking for in this release. So first fill Oloroso cask. If you have a wee look, you can see the colour's been taken on from the Oloroso cask. I would say that's like a burnt amber colour. If you have a wee nose, it's quite spicy fruits coming through there. You get the Seville oranges coming through there as well. So this is from the vintage, the year 2000, these casks, 18-year-old.
It's got real nuttiness to it.
This one,
oiliness and depth of
nobody's
flavour.
seen this bottle. It came, it's nice packaging. It's got the black label with the gold. It goes very well with the dark colours of the whiskey. It comes along in the bag as well. So, yeah, on the nose, you get like the spicy fruits, Seville chocolate orange coming through there. Have a wee taste.
I got a lot of bitter chocolate on the palate.
Yeah,
Bitter chocolate. It's almost like a hazelnut chocolate. That hazelnut
spicy,
characteristic.
it hits the front of your tongue. You get the chocolate, the kind of orange flavours coming through as well. You get the distinctive Bowmore smokiness there in the background. You get
It's almost a whisper, isn't it? It's just a whisper of smoke. It's so subtle.
As the Bowmores get older, the peat smoke tends to die away. You get like coffee coming through in the background as well, but like burnt toffee, coffee coming through. But the finish is quite rich, it's quite complex, it still coats your tongue, but you do get the distinctive Bowmore smokiness in the palate in the back there.
I think what's really interesting about this is you can still see that maritime minerality. There's a salinity to this, which really draws out the flavour in the palate. And what I find with this one on the palate is, it almost, when I tasted it the first time, I thought, oh, this is too dry for me. I just found it drying. And then just at the point I was beginning to think this is too much, actually that's when I began to feel that acidity coming through and that sort of orange, almost rancio mushroom funk to it.
Yeah, this one needs a wee bit of time in the glass to open up as well. But when you go back,
would you recommend adding water to this, David, in its current state, or I think it's quite
I like drinking it neat, but a wee splash of water would just open up the flavours another wee bit as well. It was when we initially tasted it, they were just above 54% of the cask, and it was just a wee bit strong. That's why we took it down to 51.2. But another wee splash of water will just open up the flavours and probably open up the peat smoke a wee bit as well.
And this was all sherry Oloroso casks, isn't it? Was it first fill casks?
First fill, 6 first fill Oloroso sherry casks were married together for this bottle in the 3,000 bottles. And
it's interesting to think as well, when you actually think about the difference in the casks, with an American bourbon barrel, it's got a really tight wood grain, which means that we actually need to char the inside of the cask to allow the spirit to actually permeate into the wood and draw back out the wood flavours. Because when you think about wood, it adds flavour, it takes away flavour, and it also interacts with the spirit to create additional flavours in the cask. However, when you get to a sherry cask, what you find with the sherry cask is that sherry wood is quite porous, so it's got a lot of holes in it. We just need to toast this, so we don't actually need to char this. Being the larger cask as well means that it is slightly slower to mature as well, so you don't tend to find it as dominantly woody or as sweet, as you can see with some other woods. Just a real treasure in the glass.
The sherry butts have got less contact with the wood than the smaller bourbon barrels.
Yeah. Which is why you see such rapid maturation with a quarter cask that they use down at Lafroy as well. And obviously different levels of oak black tones. That's a really pretty... And how much was this retailing for, David?
This was £135 a bottle.
£135 a bottle. Really?
There's a wee question come up on the side there just asking about the labels. It says 2020, and that's right. These are the whiskies that David and the team picked out for 2020. So as the 2020 festival, we really hoped that we would be able to postpone those and sell them at the distillery at a later date. We really never thought that the festival could possibly be cancelled twice. So that's why they've got the 2020 label. They were selected. David and the guys hand selected them. So absolutely amazing whiskies. But that explains the label for you.
So the next one, David, I believe is a 23-year-old and its bourbon cask matured. 23 is a strange age for a whiskey. Normally you see ages 18, 25, 21, 30. 23 is a strange age. What made you think that this is really approach, and it's the pinnacle of perfection at 23
Well, we went
years old.
around the warehouses looking for different cask selections. Over the past few years, we've done 2 different bottlings, maybe one a wee bit younger than other, like 3,000 bottles of a 15-year-old. We kind of pushed that up to 18-year-old. We thought Bowmore shines about 18. You're going from the ripe to the tropical fruits. And we went round the warehouse looking for an older vintage, and we found this bourbon barrel, a 1996 cask 867, a first fill bourbon barrel. It was cask strength, bottled at cask strength, 50.8%. When we got it, this was quite smoky for an older Bowmore. It shows you back then there was maybe a higher percentage of our own floor malting in there to give it the wee bit more intense, smoky flavours coming through as well. But we thought this was a fantastic single cask. It was 225 bottles. We were looking for a limited release to sell at the festival as well. It's not our festival. People usually queue up for our single cask. We think it's great to get that kind of people queuing up, but it's also become a social event for the Bowmore fans who meet every year. And I know that the last couple of years, Dwayne Miller has organised on the Tuesday night an online Bowmore meeting because they're disappointed they haven't met the last 2 years from the festival. So it's quite good for us. So we thought this one was really good. It matured in the first fill single cask. You get the vanilla sweetness, you get the iodine, and it's like freshly cut grass. You get the cereally grassy notes coming through on the nose.
I get that really herbaceous characteristic coming through, almost a slightly menthol, eucalyptus, honey character coming through. There's a real green note that comes through the middle of it.
As it's in the glass for a wee while, it takes time to open up as well. The peat smoke kind of dies down and the other flavour starting to come through. Have a wee taste. You get an explosion of salted honeycomb coming through. You get green apples and vanilla on the tongue. It's quite sweet as well.
Do you remember refresher bars?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's got a real refresher bar fruitiness to it.
Yeah, it's tangy.
The fruitiness can explode in your mouth and your tongue as well.
For anybody who doesn't know what refreshers were, they were what was it, a fruit salad style sweet? I'm not sure what fruit it was supposed to be, but it had almost a menagerie of fruitiness in there, and I think that's what you see here. It's not that ruddy, ripe fruitiness. It's not even that stone fruitiness. It's almost a fruit fleshiness. Lovely, lovely acidity.
Yeah. It's got a good balance, good mixture of power, heat, smoke, and tropical fruits coming through in this one as well. You still get the distinctive Bowmore smokiness in the background, even at 23-year-old.
Yeah, and you can actually begin to see that rancio note that really shows through in the 40-plus Bowmores. Yeah. That real burnished orange, Almost like I would say, David, if you took the skin off an orange and allowed it to dry, and then you smell it, it doesn't smell as much of the essential oil. It's almost the orange that's degrading, but it's got a really funky fruitiness to it. Really pleasant. Yeah, which is your favourite, David, out of the two? Which would you say was your favourite?
I think it shows how well I like them both, but it's hard to put. I think the 18 is really good value for money and it's quite accessible for everyone to get. But it shows you how well our new make matures in both Oloroso Sherry and Bourbon Barrel as well.
I love this 23. I think being part of the Coca-Cola generation. Helen, absolutely. It has a sherbet style quality to it. Imagine your sherbet without the licorice stick, then you're kind of getting to it. Yep, rainbow sugary sweets, Gavin. They're the hardest things to actually. I mean, what flavour? What do they taste of? It's just fruity. It's almost like the alphabets you used to get. There were the little alphabet letters as well. I think this is a stunning example of a Bowmore. This shows the extended ages of the fruitiness coming through. So we've got over that smokiness. We're into that unctuous, mouth-filling fruitiness. It's got the sweetness coming through from the casks as well. So you're seeing the residual wood sugar in there as well. This is delightful.
So the two of them we thought showed Bowmore the malt balance flavours coming through, where the 18-year-old you get like kind of ripe fruits, and then the 23-year-old is more the tropical fruit. So it's a good example how Bowmore matures, the peat smoke dies down, and the ripe come into tropical as it gets older.
And I think, I'm going to make a really bad attempt at this, but I'm trying to think about the statement we used to have above the bar at Bowmore. Was it something along the lines of, if you can't find a Bowmore that you fall in love with, then you should really consider whether you should be drinking whiskey at all. And I think that's the lovely thing about Bowmore. I think there is an expression for every mood, every environment, but they all have a signature Bowmore characteristic that shows them as the brand. They all have the Bowmore DNA at the heart, and I think these two are incredible. I'm in love with a 23-year-old. I'm not as much of a sherry fan, I'll be honest. I'm not as much of the dry flavour, which is why I'm the Coca-Cola kid, as you can see here. No iron brew in America, Linda.
Oh, hopefully there's some iron brew on the go tomorrow. Needing some. No, both absolutely beautiful drams. 23-year-old, all the classic Bowmore character. You can really see the distillery, true distillery character in that one. The 18-year-old surprised me because I'm a little bit like you, Ian. I don't normally go towards the really heavily sherried casks, but this one's lovely. I think it's got that lovely balance that you both kept on talking about, chocolate and orange. And Terry's chocolate orange is my absolute favourite.
Do you know what I get out of this now?
So
I get out of this now a Cadbury's Crunchy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The chocolate with the honeycomb.
Salted honeycomb. Yeah, that's what I get. Yeah.
It's a really beautiful balance. Not too closed, because sometimes you find that sherry can be overpowering. It's like, oh my God, this is supposed to be a drink, and I feel as if you've just sucked every piece of moisture that I have in my mouth out with that heavy sherry as well. I think Oloroso adds a lovely acidity as well. You can look at your Pedro Jimenez, it's darker, it's stickier, it's richer. You can look at your walnut browns, they're a lot more deep and dark and almost bittersweet. But what I love about Oloroso is it still retains that freshness. It's not woody, it's not oily, it's not greasy, but it's got a lovely viscosity in the palate.
When you go back to them, you get the dark flavours in the sherry, but when you come back to the bourbon, you get the lighter, fruitier flavours coming through. It's worth going back to the 18 and then back to the 23.
That dram seemed to evaporate out of my glass. I don't know what happened, Davey. That was the 23-year-old. That's stunning. It really is, and it's sometimes you find with an older sherry cask, it's almost like you've been licking church floorboards. There's a really old woodiness there, but this still has a vibrancy to it. It's still fresh. It still feels alive. It still feels, it's got fragrant. It's got fruit. It's got spice, but none of them are there dominant. They, comes back to that best balance, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Good marriage of fruit and peat.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm not sure if we have any questions from the team or whether we've actually put everybody to sleep at the moment. I think Linda's going to take a little. I've seen some questions jumping up.
Can't see many questions because I don't have my glasses on. Sorry. I did warn you.
I don't think there's any. I've been keeping an eye. I don't think there's any.
I can't see many questions, but one thing to look out for, guys, is we've got an Instagram competition running just now. You can get a chance to win some really cool Bowmore tweed items. So it's this kind of pattern that's on the chair behind me. If you go on, check out our Instagram and share some of your memories, you could be in a chance to win that. So we'd love to hear your memories.
Wait till you see this. I've still got this living over from 10 years ago. Now, I'm sure, Davey, you'll remember this as well. When they got Gordon Dundas and I a suit for going out and about, we have the kilt in Bowmore tweed. We have the waistcoat in Bowmore tweed. We have the jacket in Bowmore tweed. And we have the hat in Bowmore tweed. Somebody said we looked like chimney sweeps when we wore this. So I'm not sure, but really heavy, good quality tweed. And I think this was the guy that made the Braveheart tarp, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you haven't been to visit the Isla Woolen Mill, it's definitely a place to go when you come to Isla. It is definitely like going back in time. There's so much old equipment and how it all works. It's just absolutely fascinating. So yeah, they make some great stuff, and yeah, they were in Braveheart costumes were made there as well.
We're looking for a chauffeur for our new Austin Martin when it comes at the end of the year. Iain McCallum, you can put your CV in now with that gear.
Yeah. I tell you, man, I'm not the best driver. I would drive you mad. You know that. That's why they sent me to America to give you a lot of peace. But no, I think this has been great, Davey, and thank you for taking us through and introducing us on a minute. I found out about this ballot on the 18th day. I would have loved to spend the night outside the distillery for this. Alexander Williamson. Yeah, I remember. Oh, how many years ago was it, Linda? Now I'm going to show my age. When we came along after we had been in the pub the night before Faish and found that a couple had brought an entire sofa to sit on, and we had to open the VC at 2 o'clock in the morning and give everybody drams to keep them warm. So yeah, it's that line started with about 2 people, and it was 2 people at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Now people come at 5 o'clock the day before we've even shut up shop for the day. They're there. So, but we love seeing everybody. Love seeing everyone's wee stories. And as David says, it's a real community in the queue. They're all friends. They come every year. They chat when they're not in the queue as well. So. Bring back.
I think it's nice to see that you see people when they come back to, you know, we talked about our old friend Bernd Schaudin earlier on today that used to see Bernd at every Fégile, and it was nice to feel that familiarity. And sorry if there's other friends on here that I haven't seen you come up on screen, but I think that's the magical thing. It's about how a small island that's 25 miles long, 20 miles at its widest, can bring people together from all over the world in a common language. Doesn't matter if you speak Japanese. You know, you've been in the Harbour Inn where you see, or the Loch side where you see somebody that's Japanese and doesn't speak English speaking to somebody that may be from Scandinavia or Germany, and everybody's getting on. Everybody's having fun. There's no common language, but the common language is the dram in your glass. And I think that's a perfect time for us to wind up here. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Faish.
Linda, there's one more question come in from our friend Brian Miller. These Faish Ale bottles are 2020. What, if anything, is planned for 2021 bottling? Brian's asking.
2021. We don't have anything that I can reveal to you at the moment that we're planning, but we will be starting to look now at 2022. So I think that's something that David will be working on in the next wee while, is getting some lovely casks picked out. So if you've got ideas and things that you want us to explore for next year, get us in touch.
Bernd Schaudin, my memory's too good. It's too good at times, and it's really bad at other times. So it's a weird mishmash. But love to you and your family, my friend, and I hope everybody in Berlanga is doing really well. If you see Mika and the team, please say hello to them. And with that in mind, I think we've come to the end of the 2021 Fégile.
Yeah, we'd like to thank everyone for joining. We look forward to seeing you hopefully in person next year. And keep drinking Bowmore. The best is still to come.
Slanger.
Slanger.